Hello, and this is Jonathan McGuinness from the Questions of Fire group. I'm delighted today to have a very interesting person, and for reasons of what I call resonance, our paths have crossed. And resonance for me is when you start to vibrate at a similar energy to what's going on with the people around you. So it's almost natural that there's a confluence of ideas, of people, of what happened. There recently has been on the web a variety of discussions around health, around supporting entrepreneurs, around the difficult times that we're going through. And I found one of the people who was giving very useful and helpful hints and advice on LinkedIn as a starting point was our next guest. Let me introduce him to you and then I'll go further into the introduction. Damien, thank you very much for joining the call this week.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me. It's an honour, and I think we've had some very good conversations leading up to this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so just let me give a little bit of background. We got into then, because I noticed what Damien was doing, I thought it would be really good to just, I think we picked up a call, and we've had a call over the past few weeks. And not only did we have the interest in supporting entrepreneurs and some people who were trying to do new things for the first time, we have also worked in multiple large companies along the way, and how our paths haven't crossed in the last 20 years is almost miraculous. So, we've been engaged in a similar type of helping people come to a new place, whether that's big organizations and now also small organizations. When I got talking to Damien, one of the things he really wants to do is add value. And that's a sometimes overused term and sometimes even misinterpreted term. But I would love you to hear Damien's definition of what value is and how he can bring that, and particularly the uniqueness of it, to either a business or a person. So I'd love to start right in the juice of it, Damien, with you explaining your version of what value is, and what are the components that bring value to a business or to a person.
Yeah, thank you. We live in a world where we are in constant pressure, and the pressure is going further and further, whether you're in a company or a CEO or something to perform. We talk about value and creating value or driving value, but as you say, what is it? I believe it's the ability for a person or an entity to drive a belief that whatever they're offering is going to be delivered, it's going to be with integrity, it's going to be something that a person is going to desire. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I've come across now in 10 years of working for myself, etc., a view that people actually are taking my services because of me, or the companies that I've represented, not necessarily because of the brand on the tin or something like that. That comes with knowledge. But when you start digging below it, it's about who's going to be doing the work, or why are they going to do the work, or what do they believe in? Do they believe in my product? Do they believe in me as a customer? And there's a whole pile of what I call cultural or personal things. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
So from that point, we're living now in a world where, with the pandemic, etc., people are questioning who they are, what they're doing, where they're going. They've been furloughed. Their companies have decided maybe not to continue going into the office, and there's a whole myriad of things. And people are now saying, well, can I do this myself? And there's a rise in entrepreneurial work. More companies were formed in the UK during the pandemic than in the previous 5 years put together. Amazing. People thinking that, do I really want to continue doing what I'm doing, or can I do something another way? Companies are looking at retraining people because they don't have the work or the skills, etc. So I think the value proposition starts with you and you personally. It doesn't start with the company. The company value proposition is a product or something that the company is going to sell. But I call it a unique value proposition as opposed to a unique selling proposition, because it starts with that belief, it starts with that trust, and it starts with that integrity, that whatever it is that you're talking to a prospective customer or client or person that you're going to do something for, it's a case of having that belief before we talk about what it is.
So then, like a very clear follow-on question, Damien, why do you do what you do? Or, you know, what are maybe some of the core beliefs that you feel, I'm sure depending on the situation could slightly change, but I guess you have some core beliefs that you bring to the table almost every time.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've worked in industry, you can see the grey hair, a long time, over 40 years, and I've been there, seen it and done it. Okay, I've been part of it. I started off when in a time when we didn't even have mobile phones or personal computers, and look how it's changed. Look at how we work. But at the core, it's about professional integrity to start with. You know, am I going to tell you that black is white and white is black, or am I going to sell you something that you don't want, or I'm going to tell you something that you need? I will only tell you the truth, and I believe that, and it's got me into trouble in the past because, you know, hidden agendas, politics, etc. It doesn't cut a lot of ice with me. I know I have to navigate it in organizations, but I'm not going to tell you something that's not true. And I'm not going to sell you something that you don't want or don't need. I'm not going to advise you to go down a route which I possibly wouldn't take myself personally, but I want to listen to all the input in order to make a judgment or a decision. So if I'm advising somebody, it's as if I was in their shoes and trying to understand what they are trying to go through, what keeps them awake at night, why do they want to do something. And sometimes you have to then turn around and say, but your desire to do this is actually unfounded, and there's another way, or there's a different perspective.
And how about, like, many people are driven by money as the end goal, and, you know, sometimes truth and money or real desire and money can clash. How do you navigate that in a way that, you know, imagine I was your client, Damien, and well, my whole focus is money, but it might not be what's best for me. You know, I can sacrifice a lot of things. I saw a very funny article, I think it was on Facebook yesterday, of a guy running with a stick out in front of him and like $10,000 bills in front, and he just kept running and running, and he started falling apart, and all that was left was a skeleton while he kept running. So how do you, you know, when you've such integrity and core beliefs, when you see someone, you know, doing something with a priority that has many downside effects or, you know, fallouts because of the primary target, would you tend then to coach with them or say, I'm backing off because this is not how I deal with it, or help them come to realization? How do you manage when their agenda is clearly not good for them? I suppose that would be my question then.
Okay. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind in that question is diplomacy. You know, they always say the customer's always right, even though they're probably not right, or they're very wrong. But you have to then weigh out the good versus bad. If money is the only thing that's the driver, then that's a very sad story. Money is a driver, and it's profit, and it helps the business, or it helps you know, an entity achieve its goal and then reinvest or be able to support its employees or whatever it is it's trying to do. But if that's the sole goal, then there's no soul, and you see the pun there, in the business. And I've worked for businesses where it is the only goal, and people are, you know, cannon fodder, and if they burn out, then you hear the conversation that this person couldn't hack it, and that's just disgraceful in my mind. That's not business, that's just tyranny. The other side of it is that if the person at the top is doing that, they know, and they are also, their employees or the people working with them also know that this person is toxic. You have to then try and work through that. And if they don't start to see a different view, they're single-minded in their way, then I'm prepared to walk away from it, because you're not going to change that person. The people who are left, unfortunately, will see that. They can either go on their own volition, or they will get burnt out and they will get found out and kicked out. And I'm being quite brutal there, because I see it. I've seen it in startups. I've seen people with distorted views of reality, and then suddenly, you know, the attrition rate is like 50%, and half the people are gone that started after 6 months, because it's not a business. It's not something where I want to spend 8 to 10 hours of my time.
So, like for me, Damien, that requires a certain level of maturity, and either one, you were blessed with fantastic parents, which I'm sure they were anyway, and this was part of your character building as a young person, and or throughout your professional life, you've encountered many things that have sort of driven you to realize, I don't know what the answer is, but maybe more mature approaches or longer term benefits to acting in certain ways, like with integrity and with the truth. What do you think builds up that maturity, or has done for you, Damien?
I think it's resilience. My background has been interesting. I started at 17, and so I learnt from the ground up at work. So I didn't go to university. I did a sixth form, and then I studied for the next 10 years in engineering. So I do have a deep understanding of technical side of the business, but I also have a deep understanding on other areas, on culture and people. Work for multinational companies, and I've seen all sorts of different ways of doing things. But you're right, it is an individual thing. And what I try to do with the people who I've worked with or worked around is to help them to either improve themselves, to get that resilience, or to understand some of the tools and techniques. So yes, there's some coaching, there's advisory. As a manager, I've put my people before myself. I've always hired good people, but not always good people are able to, you know, take the pressure or move forward in the way they thought they could. And so I'm there to be able to support them and to be able to give back what I've been learning. And my resilience has been, you know, 40 years working my way up through the ladder, having some great bosses and having some not so great bosses, being put in situations which you have to literally think on your own wits, because there's nobody there. There's no answer. You have to produce it, and you know, from that point of view, you have a good learning on how to deal with people as the first thing, but also know yourself, know what you can do and what you're capable of. And when you know that you're not capable of something, then put your hand up and say, look, I need some help here. And there's nothing wrong in saying I need help.
I'd love to ask you a question, Damien. Since you've interacted with so many people over time, is there a story that comes to mind that, you know, when you think of, you know, you now talk about unique value propositions, one story from a person that you've learned from, maybe it was an ex-boss or a colleague or whatever, that really brought that forward, your interaction with them or their interaction with you, that, you know, enhanced your journey, as we'll say, on the way here?
Yeah, it was a long time ago now. I was 19, 20, and I was just called into an office, and my boss at the time believed that I could do this, and he sent me to France. He sent me to France with this equipment, which didn't have the right paperwork, didn't have the bits and pieces for customs, and van was impounded. and my passport was taken. They thought I was importing stuff. And I rang him and I said, look, what do I do? You know, I have no idea on what to do. And he said, Damien, he said, you're doing everything right. He said, you're representing the company, you're representing me. He said, I wouldn't have put you there if you didn't know. He said, I've got your back. Don't worry about it. And I thought, wow, I'm 19 and you're giving me this responsibility. And what he said is, what could you have done? You couldn't have brought the company down. You couldn't have killed somebody. You couldn't have, all you had to do is just manage a situation. He said, and it was a big learning curve for you. He said, and I know you were worried about it, but bottom line is you stepped up. And if you didn't, he said, I would be waiting in the wings to catch you. And I thought, okay, so that's how this works. This young adult trying to go out into the world and somebody's trusting you. Now, not everybody gets that opportunity. They really don't. And so I've been lucky in some ways.
Yeah. Like you remind me of something. I think that's a fabulous story, and it's a great example for you to have experienced. And I'm sure you've probably done it for many, many people since, Damien. I had a story. It's not quite the same, but it just rings into my head now at the moment. When I was going away for one of my first times, I was 18 at the time. I think I was going away to London. And my father was used to, when people emigrated from Ireland, they were gone and they were gone for good. You know, that often happened. So even though he knew I was only going for 3 months, he pulled me to the side and he said, Jonathan, you know what? If it doesn't work out, you don't find a job. And even if you're broke, just pick up the phone, do reverse call charges if you have to, and I'll get you a ticket home. And I never actually had to ask for that ticket, Damien, but the fact that I knew there was someone in the wings, kind of similar to your story, gave me the strength to take risks that I'm sure I wouldn't have, because I knew that phone call always could be called upon. So I can really resonate with your example, you know.
But you start, and we've had this conversation recently. If you start to think about your life and what's going on, and more to do with the work side, and by the way, we call it work-life balance. I call it life-work balance, because I'm here to live. I'm not here to work. Work is a factor of it, and it's my profession, and I may be somebody, but why do I call it work-life balance? Because does that mean the work comes at first and my life comes second? I call it life-work. But the thing is that when you start to get into these situations, who's there to help you or to take you through that journey? A lot of the time you're thrown in the deep end. You're given that opportunity. When I was 26, I got my first management role, and I'd done the management institute, etc. And you know, I thought I was prepared for it. But 54 people on 3 revolving shifts making high volume components is a very different game to being an engineer. And you know, your whole life then is that team and those people. And you know, there's all sorts of cultural things going on, there's all sorts of factions going on, and you have to deal with it. Because when things go wrong, your boss isn't going to worry about it. He or she doesn't want to know. They want to know that you're managing it and dealing with it. And if you need help, then you have a discussion with them. But the reality of it is you have to manage that. And therefore, from that point of view, I see lots of people going into these senior positions or being given a responsibility, and then to the next minute it's, oh gosh. And if you don't have a value proposition for yourself, integrity, professional abilities, skill sets, all of those things which you believe you bring to the table, then you're never going to have an easy time. Not that anything is easy. It's going to be a difficult time, and people then find that.
That sounds like an interesting base, and I think what a lot of people struggle with, because we're pulled in every end, from whether that's work, time, the different roles we have, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, everything else. How does someone build that value or that integrity, Damien? Because when they come to you, people can be lost, or they're going and they're so fragmented that how does someone take back their integrity? How do they sort of build up that core value within themselves so that they're not as fragmented in each other direction, and can really call priorities for themselves? Because until they can call priorities for themselves, they definitely can't call them for others. What approach do you take to help people in doing that?
I think the first thing is you have to look at your inner self. And that's what I try and help people to do, to just step back for a minute, stop the world and get off for a second and have a look around you 360, my work, my life, my family, my parents, my children, the things that really are going on in my life at that time. And then secondly, what is it that you want to achieve? And it's not, oh, I want to achieve clarity, or I want to achieve, a sense of purpose. There are a number of things you achieve in those different boxes. And then you then have to say, can I do all of that? Or which bits do I want to prioritize first? Once you start doing that, you then start getting your self-belief back. It's about self-belief then, the belief that I can do this. And it's one of those realizations that only the individual can come to. And the only way I can help them is by asking those open questions and then saying, okay, you have this and this and this. What do you want to give up? Or what do you want to take on? Where do you want to be in 3 months? Don't tell me a year and 5 years. It doesn't exist today. Even in business, you can't look out 5 and 4 and 3 years. You can probably look a year to 18 months if you're lucky. But you have certain that you wish to achieve. But the other side of it is to get that self-belief and that realization that you actually can do this, but you just need some tools to help.
And how are people at going beyond that then as well, Damien? Because self-belief and then getting there is really powerful. But if we pick a goal that's bigger, and both of us have worked with teams, because when you have a large project, the goal is much bigger than I could do on my own. So then I need the help of other people in some way, whether they're sponsors or investors or people who do the actual job, etc., etc. A whole variety of people. How are people at asking for help and building that capacity to aim for goals that are much bigger? And this is what entrepreneurs do on a daily basis, because they want to set up companies to disrupt and help in some way, but that requires a group of people in all different formats to help them. How are people good or not good at asking for help in whatever way, and what can they do to improve that ability, or even recognize that they need to do it?
That's a very, very good question, and it's quite in depth, because it really depends on how you see yourself. An entrepreneur by nature is somebody who is going out there, and the prize is whatever the goal is going to be, to build their company, to get that investment, to attract great people, or have a great culture, whatever it is that they're working on at that time. And they're driven in that respect. But the ordinary person is driven in different ways. Okay, so we can take the entrepreneur out of that equation. But we are sort of all entrepreneurs in our own way, because we want to get to what we want, or where we want to go.
Yeah.
How do they get to it? Is by thinking about the minutiae, sweating the small stuff first, and then having a plan. And that plan enables them to think about the things that they have to move forward towards, as opposed to being an entrepreneur and trying to take on the world. I think the Finns say you can't boil the ocean in one go, or you can't eat the elephant. But people need to be able to take the things in steps, I think. And when I see them jumping in with both feet, I just think, good luck with that, because you can almost see it. I can walk into a company and you get a feel for it, or you start to talk to a person and they're not clear and concise on what is it that they really wanted to talk about, or what they feel is the problem, and then you find that the problem is something completely different.
So I'm going to ask you a question, maybe reveal a little bit about myself as well, which I've done before. Is during my, we'd say, close to 20, 30 years of working career, because I've gone very much the consulting contractor route, I've had fabulous times, and then I've also had some quiet and sort of almost devastating times. Devastating sounds a little bit how would say, hard, but I didn't know what to do and I was lost. But those are the moments that instructed me more, in terms of, because things were so tight and so important. If I had a client, I nearly hung on every word they said, because what they said was my survival, i.e. the invoice I was going to give to them, because things were difficult. And I can see people go through that, and it's wired into my gut now. So even though I've done NLP, I've done various lessons, when we hit those experiences and we go through them, you said, oh, when I go into a company, I get a feel for it. And I think you can only get that feel if you've been there, or been very close to it, or have had a friend very close to it, or are sensitive enough to learn a lot from other people's mistakes, Damien. So, what are some of the key things that have helped you build this awareness? And I'm going to use it. Sometimes bad things are the best things that help us to find that awareness. For me, it was definitely, going broke once or twice, etc. No, I paid everybody everything back, but there was a while and I had debt on my head and I didn't know what to do. But I probably learned more in a month in those moments than I would even if you gave me 18 months worth of courses now, because my survival was actually dependent on it. My listening just went through the roof. As they often say, like, when you're blind, your hearing picks up its sensibilities. Yeah. I'd love to know, what are some of the things that have allowed you have this sort of sense of where a company's at in terms of the dynamics and the communications, and what it has to learn to move into the next step so they can build a unique proposition for themselves?
So my background started off in engineering with IBM, actually. And after a few years, I got into purchasing, and I was dealing with companies who were working in the west coast of Scotland and through the middle of Scotland. And at that time, it was the mid-80s, so I'm now showing my age here. And a lot of those people had gone through a very, very hard time, and they were clinging on by their fingernails in their own lives, not just in the companies that they were working in. And very, very hardworking, very, very talented people, but the culture was terrible. It was really tough. It was very, very traditional, almost Victorian in the way people spoke, or it doesn't happen now, okay? Or it does, but it's not the sort of business that most people would want to work in. And I listened and I observed and I tried to navigate it. And I was a young 20-year-old, 22, 23-year-old at that time, working with CEOs and people who had a lifetime, old enough to be my father, and listening to them and understanding their troubles and what kept them awake at night, because I was the customer. And they kept on saying, oh, we can't do this and we're not able to do that. And you're thinking, well, why not? You're the expert. And then you start working that through. People have to make value propositions every day. Every conversation that you have, apart from your close family, is an interview. Or it's an opportunity, whichever way you like to look at it. I look at it as an opportunity. But people are making judgments, they're making ideas, and they're making thoughts. So to make that value proposition, you have to call on your knowledge that you have today from wherever you've got it from, and then put it together on what you think the ideal should be. What do you think your customer really is looking for? Did you really listen to them? What belief do they have in delivering? So in one of my recent roles, a couple of years ago, I joined a company that had won a really good piece of business in America. And the Americans had put money up front. They believed that the company was going to deliver. And I joined at the point where they put the money up front to buy the product. And there was no way the product was going to be delivered. And these were really nice people. They were really great belief structure in the company, trusted it. Most people stayed there for most of their working lives, like 25, 30 years, because they didn't fire people. People left because they wanted to do other things, but they didn't have that culture. It's very different to lots of things that I've come across. But our company that I just joined had no way of delivering. They'd sold a dream. They'd sold this slideware, and they were quite rapidly trying to get the product ready. But you're not going to get a product ready and then ship it out to that customer and know that it's going to work, and it's going to work right first time, and it's going to be the quality that you want. It just doesn't happen. Believe me, it's too short a time. You're fighting lots of fires, and then suddenly you ship it, and you know there's going to be something wrong. So I took it upon myself, because the CEO didn't want to do it, to actually go out on a plane and talk to that customer. And that meant so much to them that we weren't going to hide, that they said, we'll give you another six months. Okay, don't worry about the money. The fact that you've come and spoken to me and said you have a problem and that delivery is not going to be there, we can actually do something. But don't let us down a second time. If you're going to let us down, tell us now. Because what we will do is we will go to our customers and tell them. And the trouble for them would be the reputational damage of going back again to their customers and saying, this isn't going to happen. And so that professional integrity, you seize the day. You say to your CEO, look, you don't want to go, and you're going to get a lot of flack and a lot of trouble, but they are absolutely honored that you've actually gone and spoken to them and told them, hey, I've got a problem. And so that's how I deal with things. And the thing is, your value proposition then goes much higher, because you then say, yes, we have a problem, but it's then your professional integrity. They believe you're going to deliver it. They believe in your behavioral pattern is not just the product. They bought a product, but they bought you.
Absolutely. You brought me to a couple of ideas, Damien. One is, one of the mentors that I would say I currently have at the moment, he would agree completely with you that, no matter what you do, their customer is buying you first, and what you do is secondary. And he's a big proponent of continuously communicating what your vision is. Well, this is how I would like to see the world in that particular context that you would be working in. And I just, what I'm struggling with now at the moment is, we're going through it, not me, but I think there's a general struggle at the moment where people are going through a resource shortage crisis, a lot of change, and their ability to keep up their energy and to sort of continuously expose their dream, when maybe their belief in their capability to deliver upon for themselves even is in doubt. How do people manage, because I really like what you're saying, and in my mind, I have a great vision for, particularly as a father of a family, that there's loads of areas we could go with that, but how do I, when I have all this uncertainty of what's happening in the economy, what's happening with the people around me, and they're nervous and changes on, how do we maintain that energy, integrity, even in moments, because that's actually probably when it's more important. Like, people know they can rely on you even if times are, in a bit of a crisis. A lot of people probably need to hear, I don't know, some type of words of, when there is a lot of uncertainty, when things are down and resources are scarce, how do you maintain that? And I'm not talking about positive attitude, but how do you maintain even just that integrity and energy to walk through the world in a good way, Damien?
It's very, very difficult. We talk about leadership, okay? And that's when leadership actually is what it says on the tin. It's the person who is able to, take the world on their shoulders to a certain extent, and to help the people to help themselves, okay? I say to people, I don't manage, because if I start to manage, then we have a problem. Because I expect people who I've hired come to work to do a good job. They're skilled at what they do. It doesn't matter what role you're playing. Everybody has a role to play. Okay, everybody has, and dependent on your skill, you have your role.
Yeah, yeah.
And down to a leader to then look at the different people within their business or within the group, and to say, well, we've got to go over the hill. And I know that the hill is going to be difficult. So what are the components? And to, even though they leave the room, go home, and they cry themselves to sleep. And some people literally do, because to them it's insurmountable. And it's a bit like being an actor. You go in and you put this face on, knowing that everything is not great in the house, but
Sure.
When you start to lead people, you get enormous energy coming back, because people then feel that we're not individuals, and I'm there to do my part. I'm there to pull things together as best as I can in the way I am. Now, it may fail, but you've had a damn good chance in trying to make it work. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get your best work when your back is against the wall and you're having to perform. And I've always found that my best work's done when I'm under a lot of pressure, because suddenly things start to come out. Things start to turn quickly, because I'm not following the protocol I would normally do, and I'm not cutting corners, but I'm seeing things in a different way. Survival has a lot of good things that to bring out in people, but the thing is that you then have a cohesive team or a cohesive group of people whose goal is to get one place, as a group, and this person, whoever they are, is leading them. And people want leadership badly, and if you've got bad leadership, you've got chaos. And if you've got good leadership, hey, the person's not leading. They have this inherent ability to take people with them, and people want to come along for the ride.
Yeah, I think leadership, like for me, I think my key role, no matter what I do in life, whether that's commercially or personally, is as a father. And I'm very fortunate. I have 4 boys, and the part that is wonderful about it is they're fantastically honest with their feedback. Brutal, but honest.
Yeah.
And if I say I'm going to do something, Damien, and I don't do it, it says, "Oh, Daddy, you're not doing your 3K run," or whatever. It doesn't matter, because I might have said it 3 days ago. But to be in an environment where feedback is wanted and accepted, and you want to hold yourself to that high standard, it doesn't have to be just in a family, that your word is really a contract in a way. So if you're, I think as I become a father, my use of words has probably lessened, the amount of words I use, because I know I'm going to be, not just for myself, but my kids are going to hold me accountable to what I say. And in moments like this, is if you're just reaching for the superficial, people can feel that anyway, and they want to see that your actions are in alignment with your words on a continuous basis. Did you say what you were going to do? And look, I've been lucky and lived in a few places, Damien. Switzerland was one of them. And in Switzerland, punctuality is golden. And if you turn up late for a meeting, you may even get snubbed then forever. But it's not you're not coming from Switzerland, you may think that that's a hard thing. But then you start to realize when you're there for a while, it's actually a wonderful standard to have within a community. And I'm just wondering, like Norway was another one. And when we had our first child, mothers used to leave their babies in the prams outside the supermarket for a half an hour when they went inside, because everybody was a steward and a caretaker of all of the children in the community. I couldn't even lose things. People would bring them back to me and they never got stolen. I'm just wondering what sort of standards, and because you're bringing me to these ideas, are useful in society. I give an example, one of honesty, another of sort of transparency, that are useful within a company. Like one of the companies that I admire a lot is by Ray Dalio. He has one of the biggest hedge fund companies. He has the longest onboarding time of any company in the world. It's 18 months. Everybody gives feedback on everybody after every meeting. It's kind of brutal for people who are not used to it. And I'm just wondering, society should adopt some of these better standards, even though they sound rigid or hard. In what you've seen, I'm looking for your insights. You've seen the insights of a lot of companies, a lot of boards of management. What sort of standards do they hold themselves to, the successful ones that made them work? That's kind of the question I was working towards.
Okay, so the first thing is paramount is respect for the individual. And I think it doesn't matter who the individual is and where they are in the hierarchy of a company. Everybody deserves that respect. Second thing is, as you say, honesty and transparency, communication, proper communication, being able to have an open door policy where people don't feel afraid that they can come in and talk to you about anything that they want, that you need to do, either as a manager or as a colleague. And I think the also is to deliver on your promise. I get the Sweden, the Switzerland thing, because we were taught at a very early age at IBM is never be late for a meeting, and if you were going to be late for a meeting, you call ahead first. Now these are in the days with no mobile phones, so there was none of this texting. Absolutely. And stuff. You have to, and if you came to a meeting, you have to be prepared. And if you're not prepared, then you got trouble. And I remember being in one meeting where it was a weekly meeting that I held, and we went round the table, and oh, sorry, I was caught out on this problem, or I was this and doing that, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, you're wasting my time and yours. So can we come back at 6 o'clock tonight? And they go, oh well, I've got parent teacher or something. I said, we're back here at 6 o'clock. And people weren't late for my meetings, and people turned up on time. Since then, I've been to many companies as a sort of the contract or a consultant, but people turn up 10 minutes late and nobody worries about it. And I'm thinking, but what's the quality of the work? And when are we going to get things done on time, and how things are managed? But the reality of it is that the standard, if you don't hold a good standard, then people think that anything goes. If I want to just disappear off for a tennis lesson or to go sailing in the afternoon, then that's fine. I'll just block it out my diary and go. But that shouldn't happen, because other people are relying on you to either be there or to do something. And I don't mean to be in the office all day, but at least to be available during office hours or whatever times that you are working, and telling people. But I think in this pandemic world, there are two sides to it. One, people working a lot longer because they're at home and companies can get them on tap. And two, I think people are now worrying that going back into the office, they've had little or no interaction apart from Zoom calls, which is also another worrying thing from a confidence and ability to interact after so long, that people have lost some of these skills. So it's quite interesting how this is now moving forward. And these standards just help you keep the even keel.
So you, Damien, and I have been part of a transition period from pre-mobile phones to now. It's almost in everybody's hip pocket. And, you know, I remember the days of a pager, and only special people would have a pager, you know, top executives and firemen. That was the thought that I had.
Yeah.
And now effectively, you know, we have however many billion people on the planet have mobile phones, effectively have the equivalent of a pager now and can be communicated at any time. It used to be seen as a blessing by higher ups in particular organizations. Oh, I got my BlackBerry. But what it really meant was they were then on call for 24 hours a day, probably working for a global organization or whatever else that was. That has led to the idea of presence. And what I mean by presence is, you know, it looks like you're online, we'll say, and available for conversation, for talk, to receive emails, to, you know, to be part of the conversation, whether that's work or personal. You know, and I actually think this applies across the board. I was actually thinking the other day, wouldn't it be great if you could have a little app on your phone that says, you know, contact me between 9 and 6. And then between 6 and 9 the next day, you know, if it was your work phone, then it could just turn off unless it was an emergency call or something of that nature. Because the mails come in anyway, and you have to keep the personal discipline to say, I won't look at them until tomorrow. Obviously, if you're paid by time, that's the way things could work. But now people have this 24-hour, and I'm aware that people are working more from home than even what they would in the office, because they want to feel that they're there and their output, because people can't see them anymore. And there's a danger of, you know, like we've seen a couple of cases ourselves, and we've had a couple of conversations around some people pushing themselves too far and not having, and I'm really going to use what you said earlier on in the conversation, this life-work balance. And I'm going to start, I'm even going to say, I'm going to start correcting people. Anytime they say work-life now, I'm going to tell them life-work, is putting up healthy boundaries for communications. And that could be with your family as much as with your work. You know, we'll talk life-work here. What has worked for you, Damien? Obviously, you know, you from the way you're talking, you've learned a lot of these things. Even your phrasing of life work, I love the approach. Is what types of boundaries and things have kept you healthy from the perspective, or that you've learned that are keeping you now healthy with respect to how you interact with other people? Not that someone needs to call your executive secretary every time they want an appointment with you, but how do you manage what you want versus what you don't want in comparison to maybe 20 years ago?
I think you have to be upfront. So I worked for a multinational organization where I spent 6 years every second week on a plane, long haul, different countries, managing big teams, and you have to always be on, exactly as you said. And it really struck me once. We were in Moscow and we were invited by a partner to go and see Elton John at the Olympic Stadium, and there were 5 of us. And it was great, you know, we're going to see Elton John. My colleague, who was from the US, was on her phone all the time during the concert, and I was just looking and shaking my head because I'd switched my phone off. And I then reached over, and in those days the battery could be removed from your phone, unlike the ones today. And I just took the battery out and gave her a phone, and then I passed it along. the line to the end person in the team and said, "Can you hold this for me?" And so she could not get to the thing. She just had to sit and think, and was really angry with me, very, very angry with me, because she was doing her emails and whatever. And but a couple of days later, she thanked me, because it was the first time in ages that she hadn't done emails from the minute she woke up to the minute she went to bed. And I think I think there's a new term coming called an asynchronous life, where you start to think about the boundaries. And I think people have to set boundaries, but I also think that they have to broadcast them, not from the top of the hill, but people will know that come 7 o'clock in the evening, I will not answer my phone and I will not answer emails unless somebody says it's an emergency and something's burning down or gone really bad. Put it this way, it's going to be there in the morning. 9 times out of 10, people take advantage of it because they want to show that they're up and working. And I think management need to realize, and this is more so now than it has been ever before, that people have a life and they should not be penalized for having that life. And you know, the old adage is you can work as much overtime as you like, but you don't get paid anymore, is taken advantage of. And I think mobile phones are, even though that I was part of that revolution, is the bane of a lot of people's lives. And it's not just from work, but it's, you know, lack of communication. People are on the phone when you're trying to talk to them, or you're in the middle of a meal and the phone rings and somebody just gets up and goes and picks up their mobile, which happened a few nights ago. And I was like, almost saying, give me the phone and I'll lock it away and forget it for the rest of the evening, because it's rude. And I think people stop respecting other people because the person that you're trying to talk to is not even in the room. They're not in front of you. But people are more happy to have an interaction with somebody on a mobile phone rather than the person in front of them, for whatever reason, which then says you're not bothered about what I'm saying.
Do you think we'll come to the day, and I'm just thinking it might be a nice idea, you know, when you're about to have dinner, everyone either has their phones off or there's a box in the corner, you pop your phone in it, and you know, when you're with the person, you're with the person. I think that's sort of a healthy construct, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in one of the companies I worked at, people used to have their laptops open and they were having a meeting, but they were typing and doing emails. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but hey, I got successful at it. Put your laptops away. The person up there spent the time working on this problem, this issue, this business plan. Give that person the courtesy to listen, give them the feedback, and we will all get better at what we do. Sitting on your laptop, hiding behind emails isn't going to work, and it doesn't. And companies should understand that. And secondly, always on doesn't have a happy workforce either.
Brilliant. Like I've loved the conversation all the way from we started off with truth and integrity, and we've worked around to, you know, managing our time within the world, Damien. I think there's a lot to learn. It's a huge space where people are struggling right now, and I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom. I love to ask my guests. Oh, you're very welcome. I love to ask my guests one particular question, because you've done so much, you've been to so many places, and I'm sure you have wonderful celebrations and then probably a few regrets along the way. If you were to meet the younger version of yourself, the 18-year-old Damien, what piece of advice would you give him to say, you know, to live his life if you had a bit of time? And there's a lot of people starting out now and they could also take that on board. What would you say to the younger Damien?
This is the sort of thing I would say to my children. One is 26 and one is 24. I think there's a couple of things, really. It's not just one. I think be prepared.
Go ahead.
Be prepared for things that have never been invented or thought of, but keep an open mind, treat people with respect, and have some goals. Have some goals that you want to achieve and modify them as you go along, but keep in mind that, it's not all about work. It's about living with work around you. And if you're working for a company, enjoy working for that company. Enjoy the people that you are working with and take something from them and learn from them. Also give back and be generous with your knowledge and your information and to a certain extent your time, but don't overdo it. I think the other thing is that young people need to listen and not try and run too fast, because the more you listen, the more you get back, because you're learning things from other people all the time. And then try and process that so that you could be that person and have some heroes that you want to be able to aspire to. A number of things there, but I think, I try to keep my children focused to be the people that they want to be,
Yeah.
but to keep an open mind, because life isn't easy for anybody, and all sorts of things are thrown at you. But if you keep that open mind and you respect people, you will get a lot back.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that. Damien, so thank you very much. Is there anything else you would like to share? As well, I think we're coming to towards the end at the moment. Is there anything you'd like to share with people or myself before we bring this to an end?
I think one of the things that I'm now fearless, okay, and you have to be brave in this life. And the reason why I'm fearless is because I went through periods of stress, similar to probably yourself, but not for the same reasons, in the past. And more recently, some very, very bad situations with the company I was at. And that's still going on, but it gave me a very serious health problem, which I have to live with. And having a near-death experience, I actually had a heart attack last year, then gave me the nudge to reflect on my life and what I can give back, because I'm here, right? You can't go anywhere. Lots of people have very, very catastrophic situations, and mine probably isn't as bad as some other people's, but you can learn from those, as you said. And the one thing that you have to realize is that you're here, and because you're here, you can help people to get to where they are. I do technology, I do business, those are my tools, but my value proposition is I can help you get to where you need to be. And it's not necessarily about the business end. It also is about the type of person you are and the type of person you want to be and how that all works within your life. And I think that's what I wanted to share.
That's fantastic, Damien. Thank you very, very much for sharing that. That's, and I think over the past couple of months, we've gotten to know each other. I do appreciate your thoughts on different subjects, and I've really enjoyed the conversation today, and glad that you've taken the time out to share with the people that I know and the people that you know going forward. If someone wants to reach out to you now, Damien, in terms of engaging you to build up their own unique value propositions or for support of some kind, what would be the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, the quickest way is on LinkedIn, Damien D'Souza, LinkedIn, or through yourself, or they could email me at Damien@crackshot, that's CRAICSHOT.com. And I'm more than happy to have conversations, chat, and let's see where it goes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'd love to thank Damien today for his time. It's been fabulous. We actually it flew past, but we're just on the hour now. You know, I often go for 20 minutes, but when the conversation is flowing, it's lovely to keep it going. Very much enjoyed it. I would recommend, if you want to watch people like Damien, and maybe even we have him back at a later stage, just subscribe below in YouTube and we'll have him back. Damien, thank you very much, sir. I look forward to our next conversation and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure.